What's up, everybody? This is Andrew, founder of Bloom Audio, and I know what you're thinking. Him?
Her?
After over 3 years of YouTube retirement, I'm here once again with my dear friend Steve, Old
What's going
Faithful,
on?
to talk about a very special headphone, the Meze Empyrean II. It's been over 3 years since my last attempt at any kind of video review for our channel. And when I look back at some of those early videos, they were really rough. I don't know what I was thinking, but thankfully Bloom looks completely different nowadays than it did back then. And Steve and Matthew have been absolutely killing it with our content and videos. But when I heard the Empyrean II was coming, I wanted to crash this video, and I just wanted to take a couple minutes, if you'd please bear with me, and just let me tell you why I think the Empyrean is such a special headphone, and why the Empyrean II, being an improvement on it, is a big deal. So, February 2019, Can Jam, New York City. I went there and was in the early stages of getting ready to launch Bloom. I spent a lot of time that weekend demoing a bunch of different gear, starting conversations with a bunch of different brands to begin a relationship there. But the one particular thing that I did that really stood out to me, like the one experience I had that was just like a wow moment, was when I got to meet the team at Meze and experience the Empyrean for the first time. I was a literal nobody in the industry, and Mircha and everybody there was just so kind and gracious and welcoming, and getting to hold the Empyrean in my hands and wear it and just experience what was truly mind-blowing to me at the time, like a piece of art that you can just see the passion behind it and just what made it unique compared to other flagship headphones. It's still to this day, it blows me away. I feel like the attention to detail and the fit and finish and just the supreme comfort is in many ways unmatched by any other brands in the price range. I mean, you've got an heirloom quality headphone that maybe doesn't sound like the best headphone in the world, but it just creates this, very unique and special type of experience. When I got a demo unit a month later, right before Bloom officially opened, it quickly became my go-to headphone. So that's just a little background on why I wanted to jump into this review. So Steve will now talk about the build and design, and then after that part, we'll kind of go into both of our impressions.
In terms of the build and visual design, Empyrean II doesn't switch things up too much. The frame, the chassis, the pressure distribution system, all that stuff, very much in line with Empyrean and Elite. They do change up the pattern on the grille, which adds a higher degree of visual differentiation there. In general, though, no big surprises if you're already familiar with that Empyrean look. In terms of specs, Empyrean II uses a retuned version of the Renaro Isodynamics MZ3 hybrid array driver used in the original Empyrean. The impedance on that is 32 ohms and the sensitivity is 105 dB. The weight comes in at 385 grams, or about 13.5 ounces. That's without the pads, and then the pads are going to add a few grams each, but altogether still going to keep the weight just under a pound for the Empyrean II. There are 2 sets of ear pads included. One is the angled Alcantara pads, which were originally included with the Elite Tungsten, and the other is a new Duo pad, which combines the Alcantara and leather elements to the pad. From the impedance and sensitivity numbers, you probably gathered, Empyrean II remains very easy to drive. And while we did a lot of our listening off stuff like the Person Soloist, the new Astro and Kern Con Ultra, still sounds great. being driven by an SP3000 or even something like an Ibasso DX170. But when you can give it that little bit of extra headroom, you do tend to get more of that spaciousness, a better sense of resolution out of the headphones. The ear pads offer a slightly different experience in terms of comfort and sound. We'll talk more about this in a little bit, but basically that Alcantara tends to be more open and diffuse, lets more sound through, which will attenuate the bass a little bit, but add a little bit of spaciousness to the sound stage. The leather closes things off. There's more of a seal to the leather pads, so that's going to enhance the bass a little bit much more, but close things off slightly. So that new Duo pad, it is part leather and part Alcantara, and the idea there is to create something a little bit more balanced. So looking at the specs, again, you've got that Empyrean driver with some retuning done. You have some changes to the pads, which can also offer a change in the tuning. So where exactly does this end up with in that Meze lineup? When we're looking at Empyrean and Elite, Empyrean II is going to hit somewhere in between.
So Steve and I both took an extended period of time over the past couple weeks to listen to the Empyrean II, the OG Empyrean, and the Elite. So Steve definitely has a much more trained ear and much more experience just listening and reviewing. So his thoughts are definitely going to be, what are most helpful to this video. But I'll share a little bit of my take as well. Steve, why don't you just start? What do you think about Empyrean II? What are your impressions?
Yeah, so I guess that, like you said, the big question is, how does this really fit in with the original Empyrean and the Elite? Elite took a little bit of what was great about the original Empyrean, sort of that Meze identity of a little more musicality to this sound, a touch of warmth to really highlight some of the emotional aspects of the music. So Empyrean II does hit in the middle of that a little bit, but skews more towards the original Empyrean in my listening. There's still, it's clear the target here was more of that musical, emotional sound of Empyrean than the slightly more referenced sound of Elite.
Yeah, I would certainly agree. The Empyrean II is really a slightly better Empyrean. It's a much more of a follow-up and replacement for that original Empyrean than it is any kind of, sister to the Elite or separate product in and of itself. So I think if you, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but if you liked the original Empyrean, I think you're going to love this as an improved Empyrean. But it's not, it's not necessarily going to be quite in the same range or, I think, detail as something like an Elite.
Right. So as we mentioned before, it's using the same driver as the original, where Elite uses its own. It's like the MZ3 SE driver is what the Elite uses. And so it's not going to hit that same sort of pinnacle technical performance as Elite. But if you loved Empyrean but could also recognize some of the flaws in it, some of the way the low mids could get a little bit muddy and congested at time, you would lose some detail that would be washed out there. Empyrean II addresses some of that, gets a little bit more clarity in the mid-range, feels stronger, balanced overall, but is much more interested in maintaining that Empyrean sound, so that there's a clear differentiation there, right? Where Elite's the flagship, that's where you're getting that reference sort of sound, the most detail, the most resolution, and Empyrean is sort of the other headphone for really plays well with genres like jazz and rock and pop. And we're not really like classical guys for the most part.
Not really, a little bit.
So yeah, well, I think more film score than classical,
right? Yeah.
Typically, but yeah. So I think that plays really well for a lot of people's listening preferences.
I think I can say objectively, Elite is the best headphone of the three. And when listening to I'm a big Hans Zimmer fan, like a few different soundtracks during my time with all three headphones. I think Elite still provides the best overall sound experience. But again, there's something about the Empyrean. There's like some special sauce there that Empyrean, that Meze really just nailed with the first Empyrean and improves upon in the Empyrean II, where it just has this very engaging, emotional, almost like sweet type of sound to it that for, more laid back listening where you're not trying to capture every micro detail, it's just a really fun sounding headphone. And I think for a flagship experience, it's still in that tier of resolution and soundstage and microdynamics that other flagship headphones have, but still having more of an accessible, non-fatiguing type of sound to it.
Yeah, the non-fatiguing I think is a big point where some of that stuff where I felt like I could just keep on turning Empyrean up, and it never felt harsh or fatiguing or you get that painful. You didn't hit that painful note.
Never.
Especially with a female singer or something like that. Elite is giving you more of that detail. Or any of those other headphones in the class, if you pull out like a Hi-Fi Man HE1000 SE, you are going to get more of the detail in that the vocalist, the texture of the vocals. Mm-hmm. But then that high note's going to hit and you're going to be like, I turned that up a little too loud. Where Empyrean just kind of perfectly smooths that out, and you're not really sacrificing that much detail for that little bit of extra smoothness and sweetness in the sound.
Yeah, with really critical listening, you can hear the detail that Elite or Susvara or kind of headphones above Empyrean can offer. But I think for non-critical listening, you're just enjoying your favorite rock album or you're enjoying your favorite pop album, Empyrean, it's the experience is fantastic. And like you said, with the non-fatiguing part, I have a tendency to listen to music too loud, and I feel like if you have an amp, the Empyrean 2 really scales up well with amps, and you could crank it and gotta be careful, but you can crank it and it doesn't, there's nothing harsh about it. It has that really smooth type of characteristic to it. One part that makes this a little tricky, in my opinion, is the pads. There have been 4 different iterations of Empyrean and Elite pads to date. Original leather, original Alcantara. There's a hybrid Elite. Actually, I think it's 5 different pads. There's a hybrid Elite pad.
Right.
Then the new Alcantara angled pads. And then this new Duo hybrid pad. So there's really 5 different pads that you can swap pretty easily with the really nice magnetic pad swapping ability between these headphones. And it kind of makes the differences a little bit tricky to talk about. Especially,
I think, between the Empyrean and the Empyrean II.
Yeah.
Because essentially there's a scale. Those original leather pads are going to give you the most bass, and they're going to give you, I think, to some degree, the least sound stage. Mm-hmm. The original Elite pads are kind of second place, where they're vented differently. So they do give you a little bit more of the ventilation in the air, but they're also closer. Mm-hmm. But they end up being somewhere in between. Then as you add the Alcantara, very porous, lets more of the sound out, gives you more open airy sound.
Yeah.
But it starts making it confusing when you have, the original Empyrean with the Alcantara pads versus Empyrean 2. If you throw the original Empyrean pads on there, and it's it does, I feel mix up some of the characteristics.
Yeah, this could be recency bias, but I feel like the best pads come with the Empyrean 2. The angled Alcantara and these new Duo hybrid pads were probably my 2 favorite in just swapping between all of them while listening. And I think you will get the sort of best experience from a soundstage and ooh, this is impressive type of standpoint with the angled Alcantara. But my preferred pad was probably these new hybrid Duos. I think it adds a little bit more of a visceral nature to the bass and provides a balanced sound. Soundstage isn't as wide and holographic, but it strikes a really good balance.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. The new Duo pad, it's clear that Meze is taking a lot of time in how they're developing these pads, and I think the Duo pad is the best overall balance, and I would take the angled Alcantara pad as a sort of a soundstage enhancer, film score, classical option on that. Now, it's not going to get you, the pads can't change the characteristics of the driver. So it's not going to get you the elite resolution in the sound,
Right.
but it's going to get you a little bit closer to the elite tuning with the balance there that I think is more suited for orchestral or classical music.
Yeah. Empyrean II is an excellent follow-up to the Head-Fi Classic that we've all come to know over the past 5 years. If you already have an Empyrean and love it, the differences in the sound improvements are very small and definitely not worth trading in your Empyrean up to get this. But if you're in the market for a flagship headphone and are really looking for something that's more musical and engaging, emotional, maybe not necessarily like reference quality detail, and just want that kind of classic Meze package with the comfort, the design, the great accessories that it comes with, I feel like Empyrean II just makes for an excellent total package of a headphone.
Yeah, absolutely. The total package combined with, again, it's a flagship headphone for people who maybe don't love flagship headphones. If you've listened to Susvara, you've listened to HE1000, you listened to a Utopia, and you're like, okay, this sounds great, but I'm not really enjoying my music with this. I'm enjoying listening to these, hi-fi reference tracks. Empyrean II probably is the flagship for you for the jazz, funk, rock, all that sort of music that really thrives on that emotional aspect over needing that raw technicality. So that makes Empyrean II a great pick, and like you said, a big improvement, or not a big improvement, a iterative evolutionary improvement on the original Empyrean. So thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, of course. You can check out Empyrean II, a lot of other great products at bloomaudio.com. And we'll be back soon with more high-fidelity audio content. Well, maybe he'll be back soon. Depends on how many likes we get.
You'll see me when Empyrean 3 comes out in 5 years.